Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the MBOM podcast. I'm Amanda and I'll be your host for this and all episodes of the podcast. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Fave Yogis. Do you teach privately? Make payment and registration a breeze. Use the Fave Yogis app to create and manage classes for your personal clients. Life is just easier with autopay. You can forget about remembering to Venmo, or if you're up in Canada, sending an invoice, an e-transfer, or PayPal, depending on where your clients are in the world. With Fave Yogis, you can use autopay to enable repeating payments. This will save you so much time and make things so much easier. You can also keep your calendars in sync. Google Calendar integration automatically updates teacher and student classes when you make changes. It's still just your yoga. Teachers add classes, students add teachers and students stay connected. Head on over to the App Store and find Fave Yogis, Favyogis. Use code MBOM and let them know that I sent you. I'm also really excited to announce a brand new partnership this week, and it's with a company called Ana Luisa. It's Analuisa. They're actually a jewelry company. And I know what you might be thinking. Is it a little bit weird that I've partnered with a jewelry company when I am a podcast on the business of yoga? Well, when I first started talking with the people at Ana Luisa, I wasn't really sure how it was going to fit. But one of the things that I'm really big on that you guys know about is self-care. As yoga teachers, it's really important that we feel beautiful and that we go out feeling confident. And one of the things that I love about Ana Luisa is that they have a lot of well-rounded pieces. They have pieces of jewelry that are super casual that you could wear every single day, all day, teaching or going out to meet your friends afterwards. I had the opportunity to receive two really, really beautiful pieces from them. One is a necklace that I'm going to be wearing to a wedding this summer, and I'll be sure to share a photo with you guys. And then also a really beautiful bracelet that I can wear every single day or for special events. If I'm being quite honest, over the last couple of years as I've started my business, I haven't really spent much money on things like jewelry. I've been just going to places like Ardene's or Target and getting whatever's cheap there for whatever event I need. And one of the things that I really, really love about Ana Luisa is that they have super affordable products, but they're really, really good quality. Receiving them in the mail was such a beautiful experience. The brand is amazing. The box that they come in is amazing. And it's not cheap, breakable jewelry. It's the type of jewelry that you'll have forever. One of the other things that I love about them is that they actually use recycled gold in their products. Did you know it takes 20 tons of earth mining to produce a single ring of gold? It's crazy, absolutely crazy. And right now, our earth is in crisis and we need to be aware of that. Sure, we want to look beautiful, but we also want to be aware of what we're doing to the earth. So one of the other things that I love about Ana Luisa is that they're recycling their products. So if you're interested in treating yourself to a little bit of jewelry because you are worth it, head on over to analuisa.com/MBOM. Once again, it's analuisa.com/MBOM. All right, now on to the podcast episode. I am very excited to be joined by Kaya Mindlin. And on this episode of the podcast, we are talking all about how to build a small but mighty business. In today's online world, there's so many different options to have so many people telling you to grow your newsletter and grow your Instagram following and have Facebook likes. And at the end of the day, we really just need to be great yoga teachers who really focus on our students. And Kaya is here to talk about how that has worked for her. She has really, really been able to be successful with a small yoga business. With a newsletter of under 500 people, she can sell out programs. And she talks about strategies for making this work in your business. Kaya has also transitioned a lot of her business online since building up her small but mighty business. And she talks about what it's been like to transition from an in-person business to an online business, why she did more of that, what kind of courses she offers, everything she's learned on the business side of yoga, and so much more. This is a really, really fun and insightful episode, and I hope you guys love this as much as I did. So without further ado, here is Kaya. Kaya, welcome to the podcast today. I'm super excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really stoked to be chatting with you. I was saying off air, we've been planning this for a number of weeks now in between both of our busy schedules, teacher trainings, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm very, very excited to dive in. And I'm also super stoked for the topic that we've got today. But before we get to that, I want to back up and talk about your journey into yoga. Can you tell me a bit about your yoga story and how you first got into yoga?
Yeah. So my beginnings in yoga was actually with yogic philosophy. I was in my undergrad and had to complete like a philosophy requirement. And so I started taking religious studies courses, and I happened to really like the professor. And so that wound me into a Buddhist thought class and then into more of a Hindu thought and meditation class with him. And I loved it so much. It was really finally answering the really deep questions that I had in my mind since I was quite young. It was so satisfying to me. And at the time, I was also a dancer and quite athletic. And so when I found out after the philosophy that there was something called Hatha Yoga that was working with the body, I was like, oh, that's perfect for me. And so I took my first class right after undergrad in my local gym and loved it. And I remember lying there at the final Shavasana just going, I'm going to teach this. And so I spent about a year or two after that just taking tons of yoga classes of every possible style and looking for a teacher training program that was the right fit for me. So that was the beginning.
Wow, that's amazing. I really love hearing that. And I think it's also really interesting that your journey started with the philosophy, because I feel like it's very, very rare that I hear that. I feel like most people like start from like, oh, I had back pain or I injured myself or I was an athlete and somebody recommended I do yoga as well. And I think it's so cool that you started with the philosophy.
It is unusual. I agree. And actually, it's also interesting that actually in my work now, there's become over the last few years more and more of an emphasis on the philosophy. And I find that for me as a teacher, I'm really in my heart, the only reason I'm teaching everything else is to slowly sort of steer people towards or thread in the philosophy, that's really where my heart is and always has been. And I've been returning to it more outwardly, more and more in my teaching.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you feel like your experience with yoga is like different at all because you came to the philosophy before the asana? And I know that's hard to kind of, I guess, think about because that's your only experience with it. But having been a teacher for so long, like, do you feel like you see a difference with people who have never heard of yoga outside of the asana, the physical aspect of it?
Yeah, I definitely think that I started with philosophy, and who knows, maybe it's just, who I am as a person, because of course, who we are as individuals is what we bring to our own experience of the practice. But I think having started with philosophy sort of being the central purpose or thread has made my experience different as a practitioner and also as a teacher. I mean, I ended up becoming a yoga therapist, and I find that yoga therapists, just as much as yoga teachers, tend to be very body focused. So, in the regular sort of very conventional asana world, I see a lot of focus on athleticism, on functional movement, not that there's anything wrong with that, but as sort of the primary goal, or on an aesthetic achievement, like how beautiful the asana looks as making a particular shape. I see that in the asana world. And then in the yoga therapy world, I also see a lot of fixation on the body that's about, making the body better, focusing on healing the body and fixing everything about the body, which is all also wonderful, but none of that is yoga's primary purpose. And so I think in my own practice, in my teaching, and now that I'm teaching teachers, I always bring us home to what is the purpose. And it's sort of like it's something that I'm very focused on right now in my work, is making sure that teachers are always holding sacred yoga's true purpose, which is self-realization, or the recognition of the self. And everything else that you're doing in yoga is a means to that. And it's my goal to kind of help teachers to never forget that.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Having just come out of 300-hour training, we talked about that quite a bit and how we can sort of be like, as teachers, facilitate the fact that people are maybe coming to yoga for the first time for the physical side, but how we can get them, understanding the deeper purposes of yoga and the fact that the asana is only one aspect of it, which is really interesting. I mean, it's tough work when somebody comes, because they saw a handstand on Instagram and you're like, okay, I'm going to convince you that that's not the end goal of this necessarily.
Right. But then when you think about why do they want to achieve the headstand? Or why do they want to make this particular pain go away? Or what, if we look at what's the driving force behind it, it brings us right home to yoga's purpose, because why someone wants to achieve something or fix a problem is because they feel insecure or inadequate or unhappy. And they think, oh, if I just master that headstand or make my pain go away, then I'll be happy. So I think it's actually a fairly direct line if we can see what's the driving force behind the desire that they're coming to you with, and we can still help them as long as it's a healthy desire. We can help address their sort of immediate need with the body or whatever, but simultaneously recognize that what needs to be addressed is the driving force behind them, and sort of help them see that, even by just saying, well, why do you want to accomplish a handstand or a headstand or whatever it is, and have them inquire with you into it, and then go, okay, well, we can get to the deeper underlying issue. And that's what yoga really does. Yoga will help you resolve, your sense of inadequacy that makes you think that a headstand is going to make you feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think that that's a really, really, really eloquent way of putting that. I couldn't have said that better myself. So much truth there as well. And so I'm curious, you said like pretty much right away, you're like, I'm going to teach this. What was that journey like to actually becoming a teacher and actually, following through with that and getting your teacher training?
Part of the journey was running across the country from the East Coast where I was living, and I was supposed to go to a PhD program, and I bailed on it at the last minute and ran away to California, where I heard there was more yoga. This was it was like 2000, 2001. So there was way more yoga on the West Coast. And I just went to California thinking I'm going to find a yoga training program. And what ended up happening was I was finding a lot of programs that weren't a fit for me because they weren't sort of long and deep enough. They were 2-week immersions or 1-week immersions. And I wanted way more than that. I mean, I look back and think, well, I was someone who was supposed to go get a PhD. So in retrospect, I sort of got a PhD in yoga. Nothing else would have satisfied me. So I ended up doing a therapeutic form of yoga study that the basic training was not 200 hours. It was 750 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then I took about a year break after that, and I attended retreats. I wanted to get back into just being a student. You know how it is as a teacher, you just get hyper-focused on the teaching, and even though I had a home practice, I wanted to just have the experience of just being in a receptive place as a student. So I did a lot of retreats as a student, and then started assisting one of my teachers in her yoga retreats. And then I went back for advanced teacher and yoga therapy training for, I think it ended up being almost 3,000 hours of therapeutic yoga training over the course of 10 years. It's not the norm. It's way more than may even be necessary. And then in addition, after that, I did a training in the pedagogy of teaching teachers. And then along the way, my husband and I were traveling to India a lot and ended up getting a lot of exposure to Ayurveda and Vedic astrology. And so I went and got, in the midst of doing my advanced yoga training, I went and got a clinical degree as an Ayurvedic practitioner, and then studied Vedic astrology and Vedic palm analysis and things like that. And in the meantime, my husband was becoming a Vedic astrologer. So I was sort of coming along for the ride with him and studying some of those things. So it was about 12 years of study.
Wow.
And I was teaching along the way. I think it was a good thing that my teacher training program required that you were utilizing the teachings in the field. not just keeping it theoretical. So along the way, I was teaching the whole time. And yeah, that was the study journey.
Wow, that's incredible. I feel like you just are like the definition of lifelong student for sure.
Yeah.
It's really
now
amazing.
I'm a student of life. Now I have 2 children and have this, yoga business that is its own beast. So now I'm a student of life.
Yeah, for sure. Although I think that after like 12 years of study, it's totally fine to be in that camp.
Okay.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so what was it like as you started as a new teacher? Like what was sort of your journey or your career path from like, baby Kaya as a yoga teacher to like where you are now in your business?
In the beginning, I rented on an hourly basis a yoga space from a friend who owned a studio, and I taught like 1 or 2 classes a week, and I had a full-time desk job. And, I was teaching at night. And I think for 2 years, I had 3 students. And I was continuing my training and all of that. So it was really just to do the in the field practice. I'm really glad that I didn't try to turn it into a business at the beginning, because I see a lot of teachers do that, I think, prematurely. And it puts so much undue pressure on them. And then they become so focused on the business before they've even really stepped into the role of a teacher. So I just was doing that kind of on the side. And then I decided I wanted to teach more. And so I shifted from my desk job to being a nanny, because that was just such low pressure and less hours. And that gave me more time to teach. And so then I was able to start having more hours for private sessions. And I did that for, I think it was about 5 or 6 years, nannying full time and yoga teaching a little bit, and then the yoga teaching increased. So I shifted to nannying part-time. And then I think it was about 7 years into teaching, once I had like a business plan in place, I had a lot of students and yoga therapy clients, and I let go of the other job altogether and shifted into full-time teaching.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. I want to dive into a little more about what you were talking about with, getting that teaching experience kind of before you're starting a business. I guess, so my experience when I started teaching, which was 4 years ago, was very much like, okay, my teacher training prepared me for what I needed to know, the basics of what I needed to know if I can get in a studio in front of their students. But I felt like I wasn't given what I needed to get into the studio. And I feel like that's been so much of my journey with MBOM, has been trying to teach teachers the things that they're not necessarily learning in teacher trainings. Of course, there's many teacher trainings that are teaching these things, so fully acknowledge that portion of it. But I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of like, I think there are elements of it that can come later with your business, that can come, after you've been teaching, like, discovering who your avatar is or finding your niche. Like that might be something that you don't really know until you've taught a bunch of people and you've taught a bunch of classes, because you don't really know what you like and what you don't like and who you resonate with and who you really speak to, et cetera, et cetera. But I also kind of feel like there are elements of the business side of yoga that you do kind of need right away. But I'm curious your thoughts, because you've definitely been in this industry way longer than me.
Yeah, I mean, I will acknowledge too that when I started out, there weren't as many teachers. I mean, this was in the early 2000s. And so maybe it's true now that you need to have more of a business brain from the beginning. But I mean, clearly from what I've just told you about my background, I am someone that really, I did take my time with it. I had an idea about how much I wanted to know. And I wasn't in a hurry, and I was quite young also. So I wasn't really even thinking about income. All I wanted was to make enough money so I could pay for my trainings. So it also, I think, depends on the stage of life you're in and what other various kinds of pressures one has. But I think that it's great that there are people like you doing, these kinds of podcasts, and that there are a lot of people that are doing business coaching and training for heart-centered entrepreneurs and yogis and things like that, because I think it's a lot to put into a yoga training. And as you know, whatever you put into a yoga training, you end up having to take something else out. So I think that in the beginning, I agree. One thing that's important to know from the beginning is to start to look for what you refer to as avatar, which I think what you mean is your ideal resonant person, your ideal client or student, your niche. I think it's helpful for new teachers to, if they haven't figured it out yet, to know that they can, and that it's beneficial to have some kind of radar on, so that they can start to recognize those kinds of students when they interface with them, and hone what they do more and more in that direction. I think that's a very important place to start. And I do agree it's helpful for teachers to understand how to get their foot in the door to get that first teaching gig. Because if you're not in the field utilizing it, then what was the point? But I think it's a kind of, for me, with the teachers that I work with, it's something that I do separately outside of a yoga itself program, because there's so many other things I want to put into it. So I think it's great when there's like yoga business mentoring or coaching or, that kind of thing. So I do a lot of mentoring for my students when they want to step into doing a business design and envisioning what they're doing and so on. But yeah, it's a tough one. There's so much that we need to convey to help a teacher be successful. And the business part is definitely part of it. And I love the business side of it in a way. And I have done a number of business trainings and coachings myself over the years. I don't think you could do it without that. I think a lot of yoga teachers don't realize when they're stepping into a yoga training that if they want to teach, it does involve entrepreneurship. I mean, I was just thinking, I just love yoga and I want to know everything there is to know about yoga. I wasn't thinking about entrepreneurship when I stepped into it, like most aren't.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't either. Like, it wasn't something that I didn't do my teacher training being like, I'm going to create this business out of it after. It wasn't. And I have a business degree and a business background, and I came from corporate. So, I mean,
yeah, but I think even then, I think that's not unusual. And often, I don't know if this is your story, but I think a lot of people coming from corporate or business, they come to yoga as a respite from that. They're like, I'm trying to get away from that. And then they find themselves right back in it. Like, oh, I have to do business in order to interface with students.
Yeah, that was 100% my experience. And then I was like, oh, but people don't know how to do this. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And I think, 200 hours is such a small amount of time even 300 hours is such a small amount of time to try and teach everything that there is to know about yoga. And I remember when I did my 200 hour, I was like, it's kind of frustrating that there's so much to learn, but it's also really beautiful. Like, I was like, this well is deep, which means that I can learn about this like for the rest of my life. And I'm never going to feel like I'm fully complete on learning, which is really amazing. But then you're also like, okay, I need to be diligent about continuing to learn because there's a lot that I need to know that was not covered in this training. So yeah, I 100% I'm with you. Like, trainings are about teaching yoga teachers yoga. So for sure they need to focus on that. But yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And I'm definitely on the same page as you for sure. And so I think that segues pretty nicely into kind of the main topic that we're going to talk about today, which is, this idea of building like a small business. And I think that with the online world, there's this kind of idea that you need to be on all the platforms with all the followers and all the beautiful photos and have all the email newsletter subscribers and have a bazillion courses out there in order to be successful. And I know that that was not the case for you with your business. Right. So can you kind of share with your business, how you were able to build like a small but successful business?
Yeah. So again, it was a different time, but I will say that I had a full-time yoga business and income before I had a website. And I definitely wasn't on social media. And so it's definitely possible. These days, I do tell all of the teachers that I work with that they do need to have a website, because these days it's like you don't exist if you don't have a website. But one of the things that worked for me, and I know this isn't for everyone, there's a good reason to be in a big studio because you get a lot of exposure. But what my path was, as I said, I was renting space. And so what that meant was that I was engaging directly with my students in terms of the communications and the business side of things. So they were paying me directly for their classes, and then I was paying rent. And that, looking back, I realized that had me really have a very holistic relationship with my students and clients. And that stretched over time. So I don't know whether that has to, the reason in part that students stayed with me over time, I think, is on the one hand because I was continuing to grow as a teacher. I wasn't stuck in one place so that they were like, okay, I need to move on to someone else. I was always going back and studying more and coming back with growing skills, but also even if the tools remained mostly the same, I was coming from a deeper place and I always had so much to give as a teacher. So students went on a journey with me for a long time. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I had a small number of students for many years who stayed with me over time, and they were connected to me directly as opposed to being connected to a studio as a middleman. And I was always in relationship with those students. There wasn't, I don't know how to say this. I wasn't just dropping in to teach a class and whoever showed up, showed up. I wanted and needed those people to keep coming back week after week. And so I was engaged with them. And so my business looked more like, instead of always trying to find new people, it was more about the right people finding their way to me, even if it wasn't a lot all at one time. But then because it was the right resonant connection for them, they stayed for a long time. And I wasn't having to constantly find so many new people. I would just find a few new people at a time and they would tell other people. There's always been a lot of referral relationships for me just by nature of a handful of people finding my work and wanting to tell other people about it. And then the people just stay with me over time. So I've got students that have been studying with me for 12, 14 years and others that have been with me for, 5 or 7 years. But it's sort of like once they come in the door, they stay. So I don't have to have a list of 5,000 people. I have a list of, it's under 500 people. And I, earn a good living as a yoga teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that this is such an important thing to be talking about because I do think it is very overwhelming with all the different things that are out there in terms of like what you need to be doing, what you should be doing, and how you should be growing your business. And I mean, all those things are great if that's what you want. Like, I feel like when it comes to being a yoga entrepreneur, being a yoga teacher, building a yoga business, it needs to come like from you. It should always be intentional. It should be heart-centered. And it should be like, what do you want out of this? I mean, if you want to run international retreats and attract people from all over the world, sure, yeah, you should have an online presence. But if you are like very connected to your community, that's where you are, and you want to like really build that community the way that you did, I think that, you can absolutely do it without gigantic email lists and all the social media and that sort of thing. And I have a couple of other good yoga teacher friends who have very much built their businesses similarly to the way that you have, with a little bit of social media and with websites, although reluctantly from like maybe a little probing from myself, like, hey, you should have this so that people actually know where you're teaching so you're not dependent on the studio if something happens. But just, yeah, people who like would come to their workshops, come to all their classes, would be the type of people who respond to an email newsletter, the type of people who really want to go on a retreat. So it's like they're already paying customers because that effort has been put in to like build that relationship, I guess you could say.
Exactly. So, yeah, exactly what you're saying is how I feel about it. The business side of your business should match who you are as a teacher and where you want to teach and who you want to teach. So I'm on social media now because I'm doing online courses with people that are around the world. And so now I have an online social media presence, but that was entirely unnecessary for my local business of yoga therapy clients and yoga students. And I think, so I never was on social media until I started launching into reaching a larger online audience.
Yeah. I'm curious, did anything kind of change for you when you went online, like having built this business kind of offline and being really connected with your students, having people who've practiced with you for, 10, 12, 14 years? Was it kind of like weird when you went to the online world?
There was so much weird about it. I don't even know where to start. What was weird for me was seeing more of what was going on in the yoga world, because I just wasn't around it. I was around the other people that I was studying with when I was a teacher who were very similar to me and had the same sort of value system and principles as I did. And then I was around my students, and I wasn't, as I said, I wasn't even in a conventional studio. The main studio that I ended up, where I was a renter, I ended up taking over a number of years into teaching. So then I've had my own studio space that I rent out to other teachers on an hourly basis. So I was really in my own little happy, quiet corner. And so when I went on social media, the most shocking thing to me was joining Facebook yoga teacher groups and seeing all the crazy things that people do in the name of yoga. I feel like it was a big loss of innocence for me. That was number one. And then the other piece for me was this would have happened in my in-person teaching as much as my online, but being much more sharing and open about the personal side of my life. I tend to be a fairly private person by nature. But the same time that I started getting pregnant and having babies was around the same time I started also going on social media. And so both with my local following of students and my online world, my personal life was sort of much more on display than it ever had been before, because in my local classes, I'm walking in with this huge belly, and then I'm breastfeeding while I'm teaching or whatever when I have a newborn. And then in the online space, like something like Instagram, I'm not the kind of person that's just going to show a lot of yoga poses. So what I show is, what does a yogic life look like in the day-to-day? And that includes, that means showing my personal life, among other things. So that was also new for me, is sort of being more open and sharing about the whole of my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely see that and feel like that would be a little bit kind of strange. And yeah, I would say that I'm like definitely on the private side as well. Although I feel like there's probably many people in my life who would be like, no, you share way more than we do. But I follow so many people that share things that I'm like, I would never share that to a bunch of strangers. So I don't know, maybe I'm in the middle then.
Well, I have to say I'm now probably on the other end of the spectrum, because, I feel like it's all much more integrated for me now, and that that experience sort of really blasted the more open side of me, the more sharing side of me. I still tend to be private by nature, but I'm so much more comfortable sharing when I see it has a teaching purpose, because I'm a teacher at heart. So I will sacrifice my privacy on the altar of making a teaching point any day of the week. So I do that in my teaching philosophy. I'll use my life as an example, and in my Instagram images or whatever, then it's all fodder for making a point, a yogic teaching point.
Gotcha. I love that. Hey, yogis, we're just taking a quick break from the podcast to talk about getting more students into your yoga studio. Are you a studio owner that's working 16 to 18-hour days but still struggling to grow? Or are you a well-established studio with healthy monthly revenue but membership growth has plateaued? If either of these sound like you, I've got the perfect solution. Most studio owners get marketing all wrong. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You're writing blogs, posting daily on all the social media sites, sending out email newsletters, blah, blah, blah. While these activities might get you a new member or two eventually, it will take months or even years before they pay off. You need new members today. Starting in July, Ron Medlin, owner of Rebel of Growth, an agency that focuses specifically on helping yoga studios grow memberships, is hosting the 30 Members in 30 Days Challenge, where he'll show you how to add 30 new members to your studio in the next 30 days. You'll leave this challenge having everything you need to drive people through your doors and turn them into long-term members starting day one. So if you're ready to stop working yourself to death, doing busy work that will not grow your studio, and start bringing new students in your door starting today, join the challenge at rebelofgrowth.com/challenge. Once again, that's rebelofgrowth.com/challenge. Oh, and did I mention that the challenge is totally free to join? It's going to be super fun and a great way to get new business into your yoga studio. All right, back to the podcast episode. And in terms of kind of, I guess, being a bit shocked by things that were happening in the yoga space, did that kind of I guess encourage you or make you want to kind of stand up more for what you believe in or what you believe yoga is? Or was it kind of okay, I'm going to just turn my head from that and really continue focusing on what I'm doing? What was kind of your thoughts around that?
Both. That you've just nailed exactly both of the main responses that I've had. It's both. On the one hand, I have ended up doing a little bit of ranting on social media about what is the purpose of yoga and let's bring it home, and XYZ really doesn't qualify as yoga, even if it has a value. So I there's a part of me that's the warrior side, I guess, that feels, I feel like yoga is like a mother to me. And it's if somebody's saying something bad about your mom, you want to stand up for her. So I, on the one hand, have that warrior response where I just want to make more of a teaching point. It inspires me more to drive the point home. And at the same time, it does, as you're saying, it's just caused me to go I'm just going to keep focusing on my work. But having seen what's out there, it has affected how I talk about what I do, because I see what needs to be addressed or what needs to be said that I had been taking for granted.
Right.
So I do that more. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was curious because I feel like I'm, I have my own Facebook group and I'm in other Facebook groups, and sometimes I just see stuff where I'm just I don't know. Sometimes it feels so un-yogic, but then the responses are even more un-yogic that I'm what are we doing?
It's horrible. It's really bad. So yeah, there's really no right way to go with it, is there? Because you on the one hand, you don't say anything and then no one's saying anything, or you do say something and then you don't seem very kind and accepting of others and yogic. And then it just turns into a mess either way. So yeah, in the end, I'll usually, when I do say something, then I sort of creep out the back door and then just go back to my work, my purpose. It's a tough one. Yeah. One of the wonderful things I'll say about something like Facebook, about social media, is that I also have a Facebook group. And I've been watching that, because again, if we bring who we are to the table in the business side of things, that even as I am doing more on social media and reaching people that are farther away from me, that it still feels like a family. It's just a family that's growing a little bit. So in my Facebook group, I think there's about 50 people, but every single one of the people in that group is somebody that has studied with me. And out of 50, I think about 45 of them have studied with me in person. And maybe there's a handful of people that have only studied with me online, because I mostly open it only to people that have studied with me in person, with a few exceptions. And what that means, though, is, as you were saying, with a newsletter or an email to people who already know, like, and trust you, that it's the same with this Facebook group. And they're the first people that hear about an offering that I have going on. And it's just an incredibly easy business model for me to be able to just go to this group of students that are really just waiting, okay, what's she going to offer next? And I just tell them first. And I end up often just filling a program just by letting that group know. So it's so easeful to me. On the one hand, there's the effort involved in maintaining those relationships over the course of years. And on the other hand, though, that when it's time to offer something out to my community and to the world in the name of yoga, it's so easy to have people come and enjoy that offering. I just say, here it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I really love just the way you talk about like community and stuff. It was making me think like, I love that like your focus isn't on quantity. Like it very much sounds like it's quality over quantity. And I think, as somebody who runs a private Facebook group, sometimes it's and it has like an Instagram page and Facebook, like sometimes it's so easy to get caught up in like likes and followers. And then for me, I'm like, I don't care about any of this. Like, I just care if there's people engaging and getting value. But exactly. I feel like the whole online world is like, oh, well, if you don't have like X number of, I don't know, Instagram followers or people in your group, like we don't want to work with you, or, you're not worth getting paid type thing, which is such a crazy mentality that I think, is one of the benefits of probably being offline in general. But yeah.
Yeah, it can really mess with people's already, like we said earlier, people are suffering already with the human condition of insecurity. And then social media just compounds it so much more. And then on top of it, if you have issues about, if you're trying to raise money, like earn a living, aka financial security, and you think that that's dependent on how many people like what you said yesterday on social media or the picture that you posted, it really messes with people's heads. It's very disturbing to the mind, the social media world, if you aren't also simultaneously cultivating your deeper sense of who you are. That's completely independent. That's all just, it's just all a silly dance. And it is sort of this community building to me. It is this intimate family, like the people that have studied with me in person. So like I'm saying about this Facebook group, a bunch of those people, 16 of them were with me here last weekend for 3 days of an advanced teacher immersion. And everybody was crying together and laughing together and hugging each other and bumping into their stuff and learning together. And it's so intimate. That then translates into something like a Facebook group where they've now had that experience. And I don't have to show up and be like, oh, I should be posting 5 days a week and taking surveys and asking questions and getting people to engage. It's a moving train now. They do that on their own. I rarely put a post in there, maybe once a week at the most. And they're all posting their own questions and comments and experiences and inquiries and responding to each other. It's incredible.
Yeah, I love that. It's like you've cultivated, or it's like you're holding space for them to, continue to cultivate that community.
Exactly. Yeah. And the same with the students in, my local class. I only teach one local class a week now, and I'm actually wrapping a class that I've taught for, I think, 12 or 15 years in the same location at the same time, except for some long maternity leaves and travels to India. And I had subs over the years, but it's been a sustained class for so many years. And I'm not a very nostalgic or emotional person, but it's emotional to come to this I'm teaching the last one next week, and it's got 19 people in it, again, that I just invited by an email invitation to a list of maybe 30 people. And it was like, okay, it's more than full. I had to max it out and lock the door, basically. But they're like family with each other and feel very safe and comfortable and secure. And that also really allows for a yogic process to happen very deeply for people, because when we feel safe and secure and seen and known, we let go. And that's the whole point.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love that. And so if there's, people out there listening, which I'm pretty sure that there's people who are like, okay, yes, I'm on board with this like smaller business, more community type thing. How do we kind of apply what you did at the start of your business, or I guess like from the start of your business up until the last couple of years when you took your business online? How do we apply that in kind of like a modern way? Is it working for yoga studios and then cultivating your community outside of that through something like, maybe a small Facebook group, through a newsletter, through a website?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think having the inner awareness or sensibility or bhava, to use a Sanskrit word, that each of those students is, from their perspective, is or has the potential to be in a relationship with you. It's an intimate relationship between teacher and student. It's not to say that there's still boundaries of ethics and so on, but there's an intimacy in that relationship. And that's also true even if you are engaging with someone by social media or in a newsletter. And so I think that holding that dear as a sensibility in your mind and heart, in your teaching, and then in your communications, or what people would call marketing, and I'm sure this must be something that you talk about when you coach people, that you really imagine that person and where they're coming from and what they need to hear, what they're suffering with. When you say post something on Facebook or write a newsletter to your list or make a contemplation for your in-person classes, that you're really speaking directly to the people. And also that means, I think, doing the best. It's hard, I know, in a big studio environment where you don't have control over who's coming in and out. But when it's possible, literally getting to know the names of your students and engaging with them directly, even if it's in really small ways, because what I think is so important in a healing and transformation relationship, which is what yoga is meant to be, that the student feels seen and known. And it's not about them knowing everything about you. It's about them feeling seen and known by you. And so the smallest recognition, like, oh, I remember last week that your knee was bothering you. What can I do about that for you this week? Helps them feel seen and known. And then the next time you reach out with a newsletter or an offering, an invitation to something, they're like, wow, that person knows who I am. I remember that they knew me, and I want to be around that. People want to be around someone that they feel seen and known by. So I don't know whether that fully answers the question, but I think that's a starting point for me.
Absolutely. I really love that. I think that, it's such a good way to think about connecting with people, is like, what do you need and how can I serve you? Because that's ultimately like what you're doing as a teacher. And I think it is easy to lose sight of that with, such a busy, crazy world with so many things going on, is like just bringing it back to the basics of like, how can I serve you in this moment? And then applying that to your offerings, your business, who you want to connect with.
Yeah. That's right. And I think also keep the long game in mind, because I think what people have all this inner pressure, like I have to build the list, and then I've got to sell something, I have to give something for free, and then I have to give something for $10, and then I have to, and it's a lot of work in my mind. I'm in some business groups with other holistic entrepreneurs, and I've seen, people posting on Facebook something like they're doing a big celebration, and it is worthy of celebrating, but they'll say like, oh my gosh, I built my list last month to 2,000 people, ... and I made $400. And I'm like, that is such a waste of time to me, because you could have a list of 100 people or 50 people and make way more money than that if you're engaging in relationship with them. I mean, just to give an example, I can't do the numbers in my head, but if you have, a list of 1,000 people and then 100 people buy something for $10, what is that? You've made
1,000.
Okay. So, or you could have a small number of people. I'll give you some examples. I've got some people that have worked with me over the course of years. And when I look back sometimes and do the math, some of them have invested easily $15,000, others of them $30,000 up to $75,000. One person has, invested that much over the course of years. And I didn't need a big list. I just needed to be engaged in relationship with that person, serving them in a way that was beneficial to them. Right. And they come back for more.
Yeah. And because you weren't like out there trying to shop for new clients or try to get more people through the door, I'm sure that they really felt like your connection with them. Like you truly care about them. You make them feel seen and heard. You make them feel cared about. And obviously through the practice of yoga and, you know, whatever else you're teaching them, I'm sure they felt great physically, mentally, emotionally as well. And I think that's what people are looking for. Like obviously, you know, the whole like being able to get things quickly and get things efficiently and get them from all over the world is a really beautiful thing about being alive in 2019. But I think there also is something about, you know, having somebody who knows kind of week after week or day after day, like what you're going through in your life, and they actually genuinely care about it. Like that's the type of person that people want to like invest their money in because they feel like it's a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah, it's so true. You put it exactly right. They're really getting something, they're getting something substantial and meaningful in their lives, which is what they came to yoga for in the first place. And just as you say, when I'm looking at the students that are in this Wednesday night class with me, and I'm going like, wow, I've watched marriages, deaths, births, moves, injuries, surgeries, successes. You know, I've watched so many amazing things happen over the course of these people's lives. And through it all, you know, we've had yoga together, and they've witnessed things in my life because, you know, I can't separate my life from my being in front of them as a teacher. And so it is really incredible when you can give somebody something that's meaningful. You're right. They will keep investing in that. When you give someone something that's not very deep, it may serve them for the short term, and then they're on to the next cheap or free thing. And now I'm trying to translate that into growing online and reaching people that are further, you know, by distance or by experience from me, but not lose sight of that relationship aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And what has that transition kind of been like for you? Because I feel like, you know, obviously connecting with people in person and building relationships, it can have challenges around it, of course, but I feel like there's a more natural like way of building rapport when you're in person. You've got body language, maybe you have physical touch if that's something that's been agreed upon. You've got this like way of building the relationship that is a little bit more easeful, I think, than online. Like how have you taken that, you know, that skill or that ability and like translated it into your online work?
Yeah, it's such a good question and it's a thing that I'm really thinking about right now. And it is a different challenge. As you said, it's not as easeful and natural to have it feel and be authentically personal and intimate and substantial. I think a couple things. One is that, at least at this point, I'm not doing just like cold advertising. So, what I do for my online programs is that people who don't know me are finding me through Instagram or through referrals from people who do know me more personally or in person. And so that way, you know, they do feel like they have a sense of who I am. They already have a value before they hear about a program. They already are like, oh, okay, I am resonating with what she says or who she is or what I've heard about her from so-and-so. I've definitely had to work on my language in just the cold written form because I tend to be sort of utilitarian. I'm not naturally a very like hearts and smiles, you know, type of person in the written form. That is who I am in person. Like I said, everyone's laughing and crying and giggling and all that in person. And it just doesn't always translate for me in the written form. I just tend to be just straight to the point. So I've had to learn the lesson of almost fake it till you make it. And now it's natural to me just making my, you know, two-dimensional communications shine that side more where they didn't before. It just, I think I came off probably more kind of cold. And if I don't make an effort, sometimes that can still happen. Mm-hmm. And now what I'm starting to do is affiliates. So I have, and I'm only doing affiliacy. How do you say that? Affiliacy? What's the word?
Affiliateness? Affiliatorship? Affiliateship? I have no idea what that word. I don't know how to turn that into that. I have no idea.
I have affiliates.
Okay.
And those affiliates, though, it's a handful of yoga teachers who have studied with me quite intimately. And so just that handful of people, a small handful of a larger handful of people who study with me, I've said, do you want to tell other people about this program? And they're doing that. So that's a way for them to spread the news. And it's something that they were already doing. And so now I'm gifting them something in return for doing that. And also, it's not random. It's like there's meaning behind the words. If they say, I think you should do this program with Kaya, they really mean it from their hearts and from their experience. And so it's still a family, but now they're growing the family. It's like having kids, and then they get married, and then you're related to those other families. So it's like that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's a really great way to do that. And I like how you've been strategic about the ways that you've been expanding online that seem very, still community focused, still quality over quantity. Like, it's not like you're just, I don't know, getting random people to sign up for, being an affiliate. And I think too, I've been an affiliate for a number of things. And I feel like even for me, it's like a lot easier for me to genuinely want to share something that I've personally experienced.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like I actually make money on the things that I have experienced. Like if I can be like, yeah, I use this, like I use it every single day. It's great. And I feel like when you add a person into the mix, it's even better. It's like, hey, this is the person that I studied with, that I had that life transforming experience. Like, you should check that out.
Exactly. And I promote those teachers as I'm stepping away from doing more public classes for yoga students. And I send those people to the teachers that have studied with me, the people that want to take classes or get yoga therapy sessions. And I'm sending them to my students who are now doing all of that. And then when someone wants to, learn something at the teacher level or the more advanced level, then they send them in my direction. So there's this very beautiful symbiotic relationship. And I'm so grateful that I am able to pass students who want to study onto someone that I know is good and has, authenticity, and I don't have to be the one who does everything. I can let that go knowing that they're in good hands. And that feels really lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely an important aspect of it for sure. No, that's great. I'm curious, do you have any idea of where you see your business in the next 5 years? Like, are you continuing to go more online, less in person? Will there always be an in-person element?
Yeah, I just did this with my yoga training group who graduated this morning. And 2 days before their graduation, I had them all do a 5-year vision for themselves. And I did one. I was like, well, I'll do it too. They were sitting in silence, free writing. And so I did one as well. It's been a while since I've done one. I'm right at the sort of a couple years into what I see will probably still be the same phase 5 years from now, which is I'm letting go of the public classes and sessions. I think I'll do a few here and there just to keep my feet in the field and have a lot of, meaning and authenticity behind what I say when I'm working with teachers. But outside of that, no public stuff for students, doing a handful of online courses per year for dedicated yogis and teachers, and doing most of those live. That's the other thing that I do to keep the relationship real and alive. I thought about doing pre-recorded programs, and I have a couple of those, but I'm really at my best when I'm teaching to human beings. Mm-hmm. And that allows also time for them to ask questions, and they can see my face and I can see their face, and it's an online classroom. And so it's alive. And so doing more live online programs, and then I do these 3-day advanced teacher immersions and yoga teacher training programs. And so the only next thing would be, as my kids get older, those 3 days can turn into something more like 5 days.
Right.
So those can allow to get a little bit longer. I cram a lot into 3 days because my kids haven't been able to, handle more than me being away for long days, more than 3. But yeah, so the same teacher immersions in person and a few retreats for dedicated yogis and online courses.
Nice. That's awesome. So a good balance of kind of like in-person and online. The in-person's not going away and the online will continue to grow.
Yeah, I love both. I can't let one of them go.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I love this conversation because I feel like there is so much value in, that in-person community. Like everything is so much better in person. But for myself, I've looked a lot at like building my business online because I travel a lot, and just kind of looking at like the ways that you can still be like a real human being online is so important to me. Like, oh, I'm not just like some random person who's like hiding behind a computer screen type thing. It's like, okay, how can you actually convey to people that like, hey, I'm here to support you and I'm here to, help you if that's what you want, and that type of thing. Like not just, I don't know, not just like a scam on the internet that doesn't care.
Hey, I'm a real person. I know you're a real person, and we're in a relationship with each other, even if it's at a distance and not touch to touch, chest to chest, one of my teachers would say. I mean, I agree with you that it's really amazing that we're in a time when we can connect to people further away from us and do something meaningful in that way. So I think as long as we hold dear that we want to do something meaningful, that's why we started yoga in the first place, then we can do that even if it's exclusively online. We can engage with people. And actually, it's still in keeping with the traditional yogic principle, which is that the best way to learn is to hear the teachings, not to touch something or to, that through sound is the best way to learn. So, podcasts are actually more yogic than a written blog, in a way, because we're meant to learn through our capacity for hearing. It's said to be very profound. And the same with doing something like teaching online. If the students can hear you, as long as what you're saying is apt and valuable and good, then I think that's one of the best ways to learn of all, is to hear.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. I love that. I'm curious, what are some of the biggest business lessons that you've learned through your career? I know we've touched on like a lot of that stuff already, but if there's a couple more that you've got kind of off the top of your head that we haven't talked about, I'd love to hear them.
I mean, I will say that the best thing you can know as a teacher of any level of experience is that you will make mistakes. I mean, you'll make money mistakes, you'll charge too less, you'll charge too little, you'll charge too much, you'll screw something up, you'll say the wrong thing to a student unknowingly or because you weren't being fully conscious of what you were doing, and you'll lose them for life. I mean, that's happened to me. I lost a student because I said something that I thought was helpful, but because of her previous conditioning around that thing, she took it the wrong way. And I learned a very important lesson, but I don't think it could have been helped because I thought I was doing the right thing. And I lost that student. And then that had a ripple effect on a couple of students that she was friends with. And that was just that was a lesson, it was a lesson in letting go. It was a lesson in you can't control what happens. It was a lesson in saying the wrong thing and making a mistake and seeing the outfall from that. But I think just knowing that we will make those mistakes, we're all human, and then you just move on. You do better, like anyone. Like I tell my kids, okay, that wasn't right. You made a mistake, and let it go. Let's move on. Mm-hmm. That's all we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a beautiful piece of advice, because I think it is knowing that we're going to make those mistakes and we're going to say things that maybe we shouldn't have said, and all we can do is kind of acknowledge it, learn from it, and then move on from it. For sure. It's a hard lesson. It's like a weird part of being a human, I think.
Yeah, it's a weird part. It's the part really of being a human, is that we're learning through our mistakes. We don't even really, I think we learn almost more from our mistakes, or maybe that's how a lot of people are built, than even learning from our successes. I mean, it's easy to learn from your successes because you just go, well, I'll just do that again. And I will say that, one of the business coaches that I work with, it's something she loves to say: if something's working, double down on that. And I think that's one of the best pieces of advice, whether it's parenting, teaching, self-care, or business. If something's working, notice that it's working and do it more. Like I noticed that for me, part of what was working for me was the fact that I was engaging with students in a direct way, in an intimate way, in a small way, going deep with a few people. I wasn't even aware that I was doing it because that was what was natural to me. Mm-hmm. And I think at some point I started moving away from that, and that was a disconnect. And so I realized, oh, wait, look at what's been working and just make sure that you're still doing that. So double down on what's working, I think, is such a good piece of advice. Don't feel like you have to change things up all the time for the sake of changing it up, or for being entertaining, or for doing what someone else is doing that's working for them, because that's them. Mm-hmm. Stay true to what's working for you and keep doing more of it, even if, as what's happening with me, the color changes, the structure is still the same.
Right. Yeah. No, I love that. I think that that's a great one. If there's any new yoga teachers listening to the podcast, which I'm sure there are, do you have any one top tip for them as they kind of embark on their journey as a new yoga teacher?
Teach.
Just go out and do it, even if it's scary.
Get out there, do it. Just do it. I have a teacher, he's a Swami from India, and he would say, start in an easy way, start in a simple way. It will take you all the way.
I love that. That's perfect.
Yeah. So if someone's in front of you and you can teach them, and that will lead to the next thing, and just keep doing more of that.
Amazing. And so where can people go to find you if they want to learn more about you, if they want to connect, if they're maybe interested in a program, either in person or online?
Yes. So I'm at yogawithkaya.com, all spelled out, yogawithkaya.com. And then all of my upcoming programs are there. And there are a few kind of online programs that people can do at any time. And then they can find me on Instagram at Kaya Mindlin, just my name at Instagram. And then they can find Sanskrit pronunciation videos for yogis and pictures of my kids and rituals that we do and yogic teachings and things like that. And I have an online course that is called The Nectar of the Gita. It's a Bhagavad Gita course for yoga teachers and dedicated yogis. And that is like a full year broken into 3 parts. Those students can do any one of the 3 parts as a standalone program. And we go really deep into the Bhagavad Gita and into really making all of your life a yoga practice, which is what the Gita is all about.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. Thank you so much for this conversation. This has been so awesome. It's been amazing connecting with you. I love everything that you're bringing to the yoga space, and I'm just really grateful that we got to connect today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. And I'm so glad that you're out there doing this kind of podcast that I can send yoga teachers to listen and learn about the business side of things. And then I get to put more yoga philosophy into my programs.
I love it. All right, guys, I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Kaya Mindlin. Just a reminder, you can find her at Yoga with Kaya, and I've got a link for that in the show notes at mbomyoga.com. Kaya has also generously offered a 10% discount for listeners off of her Nectar of Action course on the Bhagavad Gita that she just mentioned at the end of the podcast. So if you head on over to Yoga with Kaya, find her online courses, then choose that one. It's yogawithkaya.com/product/the-nectar-of.action/. If that's too much, there's a link in the show notes, or just go to her website and you'll find it. And then once you get there, if you use code MBOY, you'll get 10% off the course, and that's kicking off July 12th. So just a couple weeks out, and it sounds like it's going to be absolutely amazing. As always, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Mastering the Business of Yoga. You can join the private Facebook community at Yoga Business Badasses. And just quick before you go, Meghan and I still have a few spots left in our upcoming Costa Rica retreat for yoga teachers and entrepreneurs, and we are running a special International Day of Yoga promo. I know International Day of Yoga was a couple days ago, but we wanted to run it over into the weekend so it could be on this episode. So it is $250 off your entire trip, and the promo code is Yoga Day. So if you head on over to mbomyoga.com/retreats, you'll find the information there, or you can go to bit.ly.com/yoga teacher retreat.cr. And then whenever you go to check out, you just enter the code Yoga Day and it'll give you $250 off of the trip. If you have any questions about the trip, definitely send me an email, info@mbomyoga.com. I would love to hear from you. And of course, I would love to meet you in person in tropical paradise. All right, that's all for now. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.